In the NFL right now, it's a totally different story. Let's take a look at some of the free agents in that, or some of the signings, some of the trades. Some of them are just absolutely insane, and some of them are just totally ridiculous. Well, let's talk about a fantasy guy. Let's start with the Vikings. Well, now the Seahawks. Let's talk about Sidney Rice heading over to Seattle, joining his old buddy Tavares Jackson. What do you make of it?
As you mentioned, joining Tavares Jackson, the question is how much confidence do you have in Tavares Jackson throwing the ball to him?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the key with him. He got a ton of money, $41 million over the 5 years, I think $18 million guaranteed. What that also may end up doing, given the contract that Santonio Holmes signed, you sort of wonder what does that do in terms of setting the market for Braylon Edwards. Is he going to expect that kind of money? And there's rumors that he may end up with Minnesota now that Sidney Rice has left. So in terms of fantasy impact, again, he dropped a lot of balls in Minnesota. He will be the number one option in Seattle. Whether or not you believe in Tavares Jackson, he will get a ton of targets. So in terms of a receiver, you're probably looking at him as a borderline 1-2 in most leagues, depending on your format.
Is he a guy, as far as draft goes, is he a guy that you should kind of be looking at early on and should be kind of sitting on, or what?
I don't think I would target him, early on. I don't think he's maybe a top 8 receiver, but again, he's probably in the top 15 or so.
Okay.
So I would probably target him somewhere towards maybe, depending on your strategy, 4th or 5th round, depending on, what most leagues like going for running backs early on, but there's been a movement to try to go towards more steady wide receivers. So I could see him going a little earlier than expected if somebody's a believer in terms of the system in Seattle and him getting the ball a lot.
So if we're talking about, what's going on in Minnesota and what's going on with the Vikings, we obviously have to talk about their biggest trade going on. Well, let's talk about Donovan McNabb right now. He's heading out there, leaving the Washington Redskins. Interesting situation there because he's getting 2 6th-round picks back, the Redskins are. One of them is for sure. That's a 2012 6th-rounder, and then the 2013 is a conditional. So meaning the Redskins will get him a 6th-round pick in 2013 if Donovan has a decent year for the Redskins. So, for the Vikings. So, what do you make of this? What type of numbers can we expect out of Donovan McNabb? I mean, do you think he's going to flourish there? I mean, this is a pretty chancy situation if you are a fantasy guy looking at trying to target a quarterback.
Yeah, no question. I mean, last year there was a lot of hype when he went to Washington, and I know a lot of people felt that he was washed up last year before he went there, and his performance was somewhat evident to the fact that it really wasn't up to his former self. And moving to Minnesota, again, you got to sort of see what components they put around him. Again, obviously having Adrian Peterson there is a pretty nice guy to hand the ball off to. It takes a lot of pressure off him. But again, it's going to depend on what other components they put around him in terms of the wide receivers that right now they're really lacking on. I mean, there's rumors of Braylon Edwards and Jones going there. If they do, I don't know if I'm necessarily targeting Donovan as a top number 1 starter on your team. I think he's a good backup or fill-in bye week kind of a guy. Maybe good depth to have on your roster, but he's not necessarily what I would call a week-to-week starter for the most part.
I was going to say, especially, I remember, many moons ago when he was a guy that we'd be picking up for fantasy points, not only just his arm, but what he could get on with his legs as well. He's a guy that could run and did score quite a few touchdowns, and I had him on a team, quite a few touchdowns with his legs. I mean, obviously, he hasn't been able to do that the last couple of years because he has put on a little bit of weight, but this is now a different field that he's going to be playing on, indoors and on turf. Does that benefit him at all? Do we look for some type of points there?
He could get some running yards, but I think what's going to happen a lot of times, he may get those kind of plays where, maybe a naked bootleg or maybe a fake draw, something hand off to Peterson, and he rolls out and gets a touchdown that way. Other than that, I think Peterson's obviously going to get the lion's share of the carries, especially in the red zone. So I'm not necessarily going to be counting on McNabb getting a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns using his legs.